The message came at 1:32 a.m. A single notification on an encrypted phone that only ever received two types of communications: million-dollar wire transfer confirmations and death threats from rival families. But this one was different. It was from an unknown number, typed with small, desperate fingers. "He wants to kill my mama. Please, please help." The Mafia boss, Ottone Mazzi, stared at the screen from his glass-walled penthouse overlooking Manhattan's glittering skyline. He frowned at first, thinking it was a setup, a new extortion scheme, someone trying to play on emotion he no longer had. Then another text arrived. Shorter, more frantic. "I'm hiding. He says he's going to kill us both." There's so much yelling. Ottone's hand tightened around the phone. He had built an empire on being untouchable, on feeling nothing, on the principle that emotion was weakness. But he had never seen this raw terror in broken sentences, a child begging a stranger because there was no one else to call. He typed only 3 words. "I'm on my way." No hesitation. No questions. No calculations of risk or reward. His accountant was mid-sentence about a $3 million Soho real estate deal when Ottone stood up, grabbed his black coat, and headed for the door. "Mr. Mazzi, where are you going?" "The wire transfer needs your..." He didn't answer. He didn't need to. Because something in that child's words, that trembling desperation typed with shaking hands, had struck a nerve he thought he'd buried 22 years ago with his brother Dante. As his black Mercedes tore across the Brooklyn Bridge, another message lit up his dashboard screen. "I can hear Mama crying. Please hurry." Ottone's jaw clenched. His knuckles went white on the steering wheel. The city lights blurred into streaks of red and gold as he pushed the accelerator harder. By the time the GPS announced he was 2 minutes from the Brooklyn address, he already knew one thing with absolute certainty. Tonight, he wasn't arriving as Ottone Mazzi, the man who owned half of Manhattan's underground economy. He was arriving as the only answer to a 7-year-old girl's prayer. And what he found inside that third-floor apartment would shatter the walls he'd spent 2 decades building. Stay with me until the end, because what Ottone discovered when he heard Arcelia's voice from that closet will remind you why some promises are worth keeping forever. Before we begin, if you believe in standing up for the innocent and protecting those who can't protect themselves, you're in exactly the right place. Hit that like button, smash subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. Let's build a community that refuses to look away when it matters most. Now, let's get started. Ottone Mazzi didn't build his empire by accident. For 20 years, he had operated as New York City's invisible hand, the man who controlled what others only suspected existed. While Wall Street traders sipped espresso and celebrated their quarterly bonuses, Ottone was moving millions through a labyrinth of shell companies with names like Riverside Capital Holdings and Metropolitan Investment Group. Clean money went in dirty. Dirty money came out clean. The system was perfect because no one asked questions when the numbers added up. His office was located in a nondescript building on 47th Street, 3 floors below a legitimate investment firm that had no idea their landlord was using the basement servers to process transactions that would make the SEC's entire legal team work overtime for years. Every keystroke was encrypted. Every transfer is routed through 7 different countries. Every paper trail led nowhere. His real estate portfolio stretched across Soho like a carefully woven web: luxury condos, boutique hotels, commercial properties with rental prices that made even Manhattan's elite wince. Each building was a front, each lease agreement a carefully crafted lie. The penthouses housed legitimate tech executives and hedge fund managers who had no idea their landlord's wealth came from sources far darker than venture capital. The storefronts on street-level artisanal coffee shops, designer clothing boutiques, organic juice bars, all paid rent to shell corporations that funneled money back to Ottone's expanding empire. Then there were the nightclubs in Brooklyn. 3 of them, each pulsing with bass-heavy music and crowds too drunk to notice the back-office transactions happening behind soundproof doors. The Velvet Room in Williamsburg. Eclipse in Dumbo. Midnight in Park Slope. Beautiful people danced under laser lights while upstairs, in offices decorated with modern art and Italian leather furniture, Ottone's associates negotiated deals that would never appear on any legitimate contract. The import-export operations at the docks moved everything from European wines to Egyptian textiles and, occasionally, cargo that customs officials were paid handsomely to never inspect. Shipping containers marked machine parts or furniture passed through with stamps of approval from inspectors who suddenly could afford private school tuition for their kids and vacation homes in the Hamptons. Money is power. Power is survival. Emotion is weakness. That was the code Ottone lived by. It had kept him alive, kept him untouchable, kept him from becoming another name on a tombstone in Queens. He trusted no one completely. He loved nothing that could be used against him. He felt nothing that could make him vulnerable. In 20 years, he had never once wavered from these principles. Not for women who'd tried to get close. Not for associates who'd become what others might call friends. Not even for his mother, Rosa, who still lived in Queens and believed her son worked in international finance. But as his Mercedes climbed onto the Brooklyn Bridge, the Manhattan skyline shrinking behind him and the dark waters of the East River stretching below like liquid night, his phone vibrated against the leather seat. The screen lit up with another message. "I can hear Mama crying. Please hurry." Ottone's chest tightened. His breath caught for a fraction of a second, barely noticeable, but there. A hairline crack in the armor. His hands gripped the wheel harder, knuckles draining of color until they looked like bone beneath skin. This wasn't supposed to happen. He wasn't supposed to feel this. 20 years of carefully constructed walls, of deliberate emotional amputation, and a child's desperate plea was cracking them with just a few words typed on a phone screen. The bridge stretched ahead, streetlights casting orange halos in the night fog that rolled in from the harbor. The city was quieter at this hour, the time between last call and first light, when even New York took a breath. Somewhere in Brooklyn, in an apartment he'd never seen, a little girl named Arcelia was hiding in a closet, terrified, waiting for a stranger who had promised to come. And Ottone Mazzi, the man who felt nothing, the man who'd built an empire on ice and calculation, couldn't drive fast enough. If you believe in protecting the innocent and standing up to those who prey on the vulnerable, you're in the right place. This channel is dedicated to stories of courage and redemption, one story at a time. We're building a community that refuses to look away. If you're new here, subscribe and be part of this movement. 22 years ago, Ottone Mazzi didn't exist. There was only Ottone Mazzi, a 16-year-old kid with calloused hands from after-school shifts at his uncle's auto shop and dreams too big for the cramped Queens apartment he shared with his mother, Rosa, and his 9-year-old brother, Dante. The apartment was on the 3rd floor of a walk-up on 82nd Street, the kind of building where the radiators clanked all winter and the summer heat turned every room into an oven. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen barely big enough for 2 people to stand in at once. The wallpaper was peeling in the corners, water-stained from a leak the landlord never fixed. But it was home. Dante was everything Otto wasn't. Small for his age, gentle, obsessed with comic books. He wore those ridiculous sunflower pajamas even though the other kids at PS 127 mocked him for it, called him names that made Otto's fists clench. But Dante didn't care. He'd sprawl across their shared bedroom floor, surrounded by issues of Spider-Man and X-Men, explaining in excruciating detail why Wolverine was the greatest hero ever created, because he protects people even when it hurts him, Otto. That's what real heroes do. Otto would sit on his bed doing homework, half listening, occasionally ruffling his brother's hair and telling him to go to bed. But he never really meant it. The truth was, Dante's innocence was the only pure thing in their world. In a neighborhood where survival meant learning to fight or learning to run, where sirens were the neighborhood lullaby and broken glass sparkled on sidewalks like deadly stars, Dante somehow remained untouched by all of it. He still believed in heroes. He still believed good people won in the end. Their father had disappeared 2 years earlier, leaving behind nothing but gambling debts and broken promises. One day he was there, the next his closet was empty and his truck was gone. Rosa came home from her nursing shift at Mount Sinai Hospital to find a note on the kitchen table. "I'm sorry. I can't do this anymore." That was it. No explanation. No goodbye to his sons. Rosa worked double shifts after that, sometimes triple, picking up every extra hour she could. Otto watched his mother age 5 years in the span of 6 months, new lines around her eyes, gray appearing in her black hair, hands that shook from exhaustion when she counted out grocery money. He started working at Uncle Sal's auto shop, lying about his age to get hired. Every paycheck went to Rosa. Every tip went into the jar marked Dante's college fund that sat on top of the refrigerator. Otto did everything he could to keep food on the table, to keep the lights on, to keep Dante's laughter echoing through their small home. He became the man of the house at 16, shouldering responsibilities that should have belonged to his disappeared father. Then came the night that ended everything. It was past midnight on a Tuesday in March. Otto had fallen asleep at his desk, physics textbook open in front of him, when he heard the sound that would haunt him forever, their front door splintering under the force of a boot. 3 men burst in, faces covered with bandanas, voices brutal and demanding. The tallest one had a gun, a silver revolver that caught the dim light from the hallway. They wanted money. Money Otto's father owed to someone named Carmine. Debts from poker games and horse races. $5,000. Might as well have been 5 million. "We don't have it," Rosa screamed, stepping between the men and her sons. "Please, he's gone. He left us with nothing." "Then you'll pay his debt another way," the man with the gun said. He hit Rosa so hard she collapsed against the kitchen counter, head cracking against the tile backsplash. Otto lunged forward, pure instinct, no thought. But he was just a kid, skinny and scared, too weak against 3 grown men. One of them grabbed him, threw him against the wall. Stars exploded across his vision. And Dante, small, terrified Dante in his sunflower pajamas, grabbed a kitchen knife from the counter and charged at the man who'd hit their mother. "Leave her alone." His voice was high, breaking, the voice of a child trying to be brave. The gunshot was deafening in that cramped apartment. A sound like the world ending. Dante dropped like a puppet with cut strings, the knife clattering across the floor. The men ran. Footsteps thundering down the stairs, the broken door swinging on its hinges. Otto caught his brother before he hit the floor, pressed his hands against the wound in Dante's small chest. Blood poured between his fingers, hot and unstoppable. He screamed for his mother to call 911, his voice breaking, tears streaming down his face. Rosa was already dialing, hands shaking so badly she could barely press the numbers. The ambulance took 17 minutes. It felt like 17 hours. Otto held Dante the entire time, whispering promises he couldn't keep, begging his brother to hold on, to stay with him. Dante's sunflower pajamas turned from yellow to dark red. At the hospital, under fluorescent lights that made everything look like a nightmare, Dante's small hand found Otto's. His breathing was shallow, rattling like stones in a jar. Doctors were shouting codes, nurses running with equipment, but all Otto could hear was his brother's voice, weak and fading. "Otto," Dante whispered, blood on his lips, his eyes already distant. "Don't let other kids be scared like me. Promise you'll be strong for them." I promise, Dante. I promise. Just stay with me. Please. But Dante was already slipping away, his grip loosening, his eyes losing focus. Be a hero, Otto. Like Wolverine. Those were the last words his brother ever spoke. Dante Mazzi died at 3:47 a.m., still holding Otto's hand, still wearing those sunflower pajamas now stained dark red. The boy named Ottone Mazzi died that night too. What crawled out of that hospital room was something else entirely, something cold, something forged in grief and rage. Something that would never again be too weak to protect the innocent. The police came. They took statements, snapped photographs, and promised justice. Two detectives in wrinkled suits sat across from Otto in a sterile interrogation room and assured him they'd find the men who killed his brother. Detective Morrison, an older man with kind eyes, even put his hand on Otto's shoulder and said, "Son, we're going to make this right. I promise you." They never did. The investigation stalled within days. The witnesses, neighbors who'd heard the gunshot, who'd seen 3 men running from the building, suddenly couldn't remember details. Or they moved away. Or they simply stopped answering their doors when police came knocking. Fear was a powerful silencer in neighborhoods where talking to cops could get you killed. The case went cold within 6 weeks. No arrests. No leads. No consequences. The system that was supposed to protect them had failed, and Dante's death became just another statistic in a city that had seen too much violence to care about one more dead kid in Queens. Case number 2003-4721. Filed away. Forgotten. Otto attended the funeral in a borrowed suit that didn't fit, the sleeves too short, the pants too long. He stood between his mother and Uncle Sal, watching his mother sob over a casket that seemed impossibly small, covered in sunflowers that would wilt and die just like the boy inside. A priest who'd never met Dante talked about God's plan and heaven's mercy, empty words that meant nothing when a 9-year-old was dead because his father couldn't pay his gambling debts. And something inside Otto calcified into stone. Rosa never recovered. She became a ghost in their apartment, going through the motions of living, but never truly alive. She worked her shifts at the hospital, came home, stared at Dante's empty bed, and cried silent tears that broke Otto's heart more than any physical pain ever could. She aged decades and months. Otto made a decision in that cemetery, standing over his brother's grave. If the system wouldn't deliver justice, he would become the system. If the law couldn't protect the innocent, he would become the law. If good men like his brother died while bad men walked free, then he would become something between good and bad, something powerful enough that no one would ever dare take from him again. He started small, like all empires do. Running errands for neighborhood bookies, delivering packages wrapped in brown paper that he knew better than to open. He learned to move through the streets like smoke, invisible until he wanted to be seen. He learned which corners belonged to which crews, which names meant power, which faces meant danger. He studied the language of violence and power with the same intensity he'd once studied for school. He understood that in New York's underworld, respect was earned in blood and maintained through fear. You either made people afraid of you, or you became the thing they weren't afraid to hurt. By 19, he'd climbed high enough to catch the attention of the Constantino family, one of the 5 major crime families that controlled New York's boroughs like feudal kingdoms. They saw potential in the quiet kid with dead eyes and a gift for numbers. While other young men in the organization were hot-headed and violent, Otto was cold and calculating. He could look at a ledger and find the patterns others missed. He could turn a failing business into a profitable front with just a few strategic changes. By 23, he was laundering money through legitimate businesses, dry cleaners, pizza places, nail salons, turning drug profits into real estate investments. He learned corporate law and banking regulations better than most lawyers, understanding that the real power in organized crime wasn't guns and violence, it was paperwork and shell corporations. Violence was messy. Money was clean. By 25, he'd orchestrated a hostile takeover of 3 rival operations without firing a single shot. Just strategic financial pressure and well-placed threats. He bought out their suppliers, turned their customers, and made their territories worthless. Then he walked in and took what was left. The old bosses respected that. They made him a capo, a captain younger than anyone in the family's history. Ottone Mazzi disappeared entirely. Birth certificates were altered through contacts in the records office. School transcripts were changed. Old photographs were destroyed. A new identity emerged from the ashes of the old one, Ottone Mazzi, a name that would make grown men lower their voices when spoken in the right rooms. A name that appeared on corporate documents, but never in police files. A ghost who controlled billions while remaining invisible. He built walls around his heart brick by brick, each one cemented with the memory of his brother's blood on those sunflower pajamas. Trust no one, everyone betrays eventually. Love nothing, everything you love can be used against you. Feel nothing, emotion was the weakness that got Dante killed, the vulnerability that turned strong men into victims. It was the only way to survive. Emotion was the luxury Otto could no longer afford. For 20 years, those walls held. He became untouchable, unreachable, a ghost in an expensive suit who controlled billions while feeling nothing. His mother died when he was 32, heart attack in her sleep, the doctors said, but Otto knew better. She died of a broken heart 8 years earlier. Her body just took longer to catch up. He attended her funeral alone, wearing a black suit that cost more than their old apartment's yearly rent, and felt nothing. He'd trained himself too well. Until a text message at 1:32 a.m. from a terrified 7-year-old girl shattered every brick. Stories like this remind us why we can't give up on justice, even when the system fails. Every subscriber helps us share more stories of people who refuse to stay victims. Hit that subscribe button. Let's reach 10,000 voices demanding accountability together. The GPS on Ottone's dashboard glowed blue in the darkness, a calm female voice cutting through the hum of the engine. 7 minutes to destination. 7 minutes. It felt like 7 hours. It felt like 7 seconds. Time had become elastic, stretching and contracting with each passing streetlight, each red light he ran, each turn that brought him closer to a girl he'd never met but was already determined to save. His Mercedes ate up the Brooklyn streets with predatory efficiency. He knew these roads, had grown up not far from here, back when he was Ottone Mazzi, and the world was simpler. The neighborhoods had changed over 20 years. Gentrification had crept in like a slow tide, coffee shops replacing corner stores, luxury condos rising where warehouses once stood. But some blocks remained the same, forgotten pockets where poverty and violence still lived side by side. His phone vibrated again. He glanced down at the screen mounted on his dashboard, and the words there made his chest tighten in a way 20 years of violence and betrayal never had. I'm really scared. I can't stop shaking. Are you really coming? The message was punctuated with a misspelling, the grammar of a child writing with trembling fingers. Real. Genuine. Desperate. Ottone's hands clenched the steering wheel so hard the leather creaked. He'd heard desperation before, in the voices of men begging for their lives in warehouse basements, in the pleas of those who'd crossed him and realized too late what that meant. He'd listened to grown men cry and felt nothing. But this was different. This was the sound of a child losing hope, of innocence confronting the reality that maybe no one was coming, that maybe she was alone after all, that maybe adults lied when they promised to help. He couldn't let that happen. Wouldn't let that happen. At a red light on Atlantic Avenue, he grabbed his phone and typed quickly, fingers moving with an urgency he hadn't felt in decades. His usual messages were cold, brief, transactional. This one was different. I'm really coming. What's your name, brave girl? He'd called her brave. When was the last time he'd used a word like that? When was the last time he'd tried to comfort someone instead of intimidate them? The reply came within seconds, as if she'd been staring at her phone, waiting, praying for confirmation that this stranger was real, that help was actually coming. Arcelia. I'm 7. I'm wearing my sunflower dress. The words hit him like a physical blow. His throat constricted. His vision blurred for just a moment, and he had to blink hard to clear it. Sunflower dress. Dante's sunflower pajamas. The universe was speaking to him in a language he'd tried to forget, reminding him of promises made in hospital rooms under fluorescent lights, of a 9-year-old boy who'd believed his older brother could protect him and died because Otto wasn't strong enough. But he was strong enough now. He'd spent 20 years becoming strong enough. The light turned green. A car honked behind him, impatient. Ottone didn't move for 3 full seconds, his hands frozen on the wheel, memories crashing over him like waves. Then he shook his head, clearing the ghosts, and pressed the accelerator. His fingers hovered over the keyboard. For the first time in 20 years, the mask slipped completely. He typed a name he hadn't used since the night his brother died, a name he'd buried so deep he'd almost forgotten it was ever his. Arcelia, my name is Otto. Hold on. I'm almost there. He sent the message and pressed the accelerator harder. The Mercedes surged forward, weaving through late-night traffic with precision born of urgency. Brooklyn streets blurred past, bodegas with security gates covered in graffiti, abandoned warehouses with broken windows like empty eyes, residential blocks where families slept unaware that a monster was terrorizing a little girl in a sunflower dress just a few buildings over. 5 minutes to destination, the GPS announced in that same calm voice, oblivious to the storm raging inside him. Ottone's jaw tightened. His pulse hammered in his ears, a rhythm he hadn't felt since the night Dante died. Every second felt like a betrayal of the promise he'd made to his brother, of the vow he'd buried under 20 years of deliberate numbness. Every red light was torture. Every block was an eternity. Another vibration. Another message. Thank you, Otto. I knew someone would come. She'd called him Otto. Not Mr. Mazzi. Not Sir. Just Otto, the name his mother used to call him when she tucked him in at night, the name Dante had gasped with his dying breath. Not Ottone Mazzi, the feared crime lord who controlled billions. Just Otto, the boy who'd failed to save his brother but refused to fail again. The boy who'd made a promise 22 years ago and was finally keeping it. He was 3 minutes away now, and the walls he'd built around his heart were crumbling with every passing second. 20 years of carefully constructed emotional armor, disintegrating because a 7-year-old girl in a sunflower dress needed him to be human again. 2 minutes to destination. Ottone could see the street now, see the building. His hands were steady on the wheel, years of discipline keeping them from shaking, but inside, Ottone Mazzi was screaming. Hold on, Arcelia. I'm coming. The address led him to a narrow street in Brooklyn where the streetlights flickered like dying stars, struggling against the darkness. Modest brownstones lined both sides of the street, their facades cracked and weathered by decades of harsh winters and humid summers, their stoops cluttered with forgotten bicycles and overflowing trash bags. Fire escapes zigzagged down brick walls like iron veins, laundry hanging from some of them even at this late hour. This was a neighborhood where people minded their own business, where screams in the night were met with closed curtains and turned-up televisions, where calling the police was seen as betrayal, where problems were handled inside family walls or not at all. Ottone recognized it because he'd grown up in a neighborhood exactly like this, where survival meant keeping your head down and your mouth shut. He killed the engine half a block away, not wanting the sound to alert anyone inside. The sudden silence was deafening, broken only by the distant wail of a siren somewhere in the city and the bass-heavy thump of music from a car passing on the next block. He stepped out of the Mercedes, his Italian leather shoes silent against cracked pavement. The October air was crisp, carrying the smell of garbage and distant rain. He closed the door carefully, the soft click barely audible. The building in question was third from the corner, 4 stories of faded brick with a chipped concrete stoop, metal railing rusted in places. Graffiti tagged the bottom floor, territorial markings from local crews, declarations of love, crude drawings. A broken security camera hung uselessly above the entrance, its wires exposed like entrails. 3rd floor apartment, Arcelia had said. Unit 3C. He could see it from here, a window with a crack running diagonally across the glass, curtains half drawn, a light on inside casting shadows that moved with violence. Even from the street, even half a block away, he could sense the wrongness of it. Then he heard it. A man's voice, vicious and slurred, words bleeding together in drunken rage. Where is she? Where's that little brat? Thinks she can hide from me. Something shattered. Glass exploding against a wall, the sound crystal clear in the quiet street. A woman's voice followed, high and pleading, desperate. Please, Thomas, she's just a child. She didn't do anything. Please stop. The sound of flesh hitting flesh. A cry of pain, abruptly cut off. Another crash. The sound of furniture overturning, wood splintering. More shouting, the words indistinct, but the violence unmistakable. Ottone's phone lit up in his hand, vibrating urgently against his palm. He's coming to find me. I think this is it. His blood went cold, then immediately hot. His jaw set into a hard line, the muscle jumping beneath his skin as his teeth ground together. With practiced efficiency born of 2 decades in the criminal underworld, he reached beneath his coat and withdrew his Glock 19, checking the chamber with a smooth, mechanical motion that required no thought. Loaded. Ready. 15 rounds. More than enough. He'd killed men with less. He moved toward the building's entrance like a shadow given purpose, each step deliberate, controlled. His breathing was steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins like liquid fire. This was familiar territory, the hunt, the approach, the moment before violence erupted like a storm. He'd done this 100 times before. Rival crews. Traitors within his own organization. Men who'd stolen from him, lied to him, threatened him. But never like this. Never with a child's life hanging in the balance. Never with Dante's ghost walking beside him, whispering promises made in hospital rooms. The front door was unlocked. Sloppy. Amateur. The kind of mistake men like Thomas Kane made because they'd never faced real consequences, never learned that unlocked doors were invitations to monsters. Ottone slipped inside, boots silent on worn stairs that creaked under his weight. The building smelled of old cooking oil and mildew, wallpaper peeling in strips, mailboxes dented and broken. 1st floor, someone's television playing too loud, a game show with canned laughter. 2nd floor, a baby crying somewhere, a mother's tired voice trying to soothe. 3rd floor, the violence was a living thing, pulsing through the walls like a heartbeat. He could hear everything now. The man's ragged breathing. The woman's quiet sobbing. Footsteps, heavy, unsteady, moving through the apartment. A door opening. Another. Come out, wherever you are, Thomas Kane sing-songed, his voice dripping with malice. You can't hide forever, little girl. Daddy's got business with your mama, and you're just making it worse. Ottone's grip tightened on his weapon. He'd heard men like this before. Bullies. Cowards. The kind who only picked fights they knew they could win, who only hurt people weaker than themselves. The kind who justified their violence with excuses about respect and business and teaching lessons. He wasn't hunting a man. Men could be reasoned with, negotiated with, understood. They had lines they wouldn't cross, principles they held to, even twisted ones. No, what waited behind that door wasn't a man. It was a predator, a coward who used his size and rage to terrorize those weaker than him. Who beat women. Who made children hide in closets wearing sunflower dresses, praying to strangers for salvation because the people who should protect them couldn't. Ottone Mazzi had spent 20 years becoming the most dangerous thing in New York's underworld. He'd built an empire on fear and respect. He'd made men twice his size back down with just a look. He'd orchestrated murders with a phone call, destroyed lives with a signature. Tonight, he would remind Thomas Kane that there were worse things than death. And they all had his name. He reached apartment 3C. The door was slightly ajar, light spilling through the crack. Inside, he could hear Kane moving, cursing, throwing things. He could hear the woman's labored breathing. He could hear his own heartbeat, steady and calm despite everything. Ottone checked his weapon one more time. Then he pushed the door open and stepped into hell. The apartment was a war zone. An overturned couch, its cushions torn and scattered across the floor like wounded animals. A shattered coffee table, glass glittering like diamonds across the hardwood floor, mixing with drops of blood that told a story of violence. Picture frames smashed against walls, their photos of happier times now destroyed. A family at the beach, a little girl blowing out birthday candles, a woman laughing in the sun. All of it ruined. The metallic scent of blood hung thick in the air, mixing with the sour stench of spilled whiskey and something else, fear. The apartment reeked of it. And there, in the center of the destruction, lay Valentina Romano. She was unconscious, face down on the floor near the overturned couch, one arm twisted at an unnatural angle beneath her body. Her face was bruised purple and black, both eyes swollen, split lip still bleeding. Blood matted her dark hair, creating a small pool on the hardwood beneath her head. Her breathing was shallow, labored, each breath rattling in her chest. But she was alive. Her chest rose and fell. Alive. Ottone's jaw tightened as he processed the scene. This woman had fought for her daughter. The defensive wounds on her arms told that story. The broken lamp near her body, wielded as a weapon. She'd taken the beating to buy Arcelia time to hide, to text, to pray for a miracle that probably wouldn't come. Most miracles didn't, not in neighborhoods like this. But tonight was different. Tonight, the miracle had a Glock and 20 years of rage. Heavy footsteps echoed from somewhere deeper in the apartment, the kitchen, based on the acoustics. Ottone's eyes snapped toward the sound, his weapon rising instinctively to a two-handed grip, finger resting alongside the trigger guard. Professional. Controlled. Thomas Kane appeared in the kitchen doorway, a large man, easily 6'2" and 220 pounds, broad shoulders filling the frame. He was wearing what had once been an expensive suit, custom-tailored, Italian fabric, the kind Wall Street brokers wore to close deals. Now the jacket was off, discarded somewhere, the white shirt untucked and stained with wine and blood that might not all be his own. His tie hung loose like a noose waiting to be tightened. His face was flushed red with alcohol and rage, eyes wild and unfocused, pupils dilated. His knuckles were bloody and raw. He brandished a broken wine bottle, jagged glass catching the dim light like a weapon from a nightmare. Green glass, expensive bottle, Ottone noted absently. The kind that cost $300 at restaurants. Wasted now, turned into a crude blade. "Who the hell are you?" Kane slurred, swaying slightly as he tried to focus on the intruder. His eyes took a moment to register the gun pointed at his chest. "This is private property. Private business. Between me and he gestured vaguely toward Valentina's unconscious form. "Business partner. Get out before he charged. It was the drunken, clumsy attack of a man who'd only ever fought those weaker than him. The kind of move that worked on women and children but was suicide against a professional. Kane came at him in a straight line. No feinting, no strategy, just animal rage and liquid courage. Ottone moved like lightning striking water, fluid, precise, devastating. One step to the side, and Kane's momentum carried him past, the broken bottle slashing through empty air. Ottone's hand shot out, striking Kane's wrist with surgical precision, targeting the pressure point with the edge of his palm. The bottle shattered against the floor, glass exploding across hardwood. Before Kane could react, before his alcohol-soaked brain could process what was happening, Ottone swept his legs out from under him with a practiced motion. The bigger man went down hard, air exploding from his lungs in a whoosh of surprise and pain. 3 seconds. That's all it took. That's all it took to neutralize a man twice his size. Ottone dropped his knee onto Kane's spine, pinning him like an insect under glass. The Glock pressed cold and unforgiving against the man's temple, metal-kissing skin. Kane gasped, struggled, tried to push up with hands that found no purchase on the glass-covered floor. Ottone pressed harder, grinding his knee into the vertebrae. The struggling stopped. "Where is the child?" Ottone's voice was ice and death, each word perfectly enunciated. Kane whimpered, the sound pathetic coming from such a large man. "I don't, this isn't what it looks like." Ottone cocked the hammer. The click echoed like thunder in the destroyed apartment. "Last chance." "Where is Arcelia?" This is what happens when someone finally says enough. If you're tired of seeing bullies win, of seeing violence go unchecked, then you're part of something bigger here. Subscribe and join thousands who believe in fighting back, one story, one stand, one victory at a time. "Where is the child?" Ottone repeated, his voice a blade wrapped in silk, each word carefully measured. Kane squirmed beneath his knee, face pressed against the blood-stained floor, glass cutting into his cheek. "Look, it's a business dispute, okay? Valentina and we had a deal, a nightclub partnership in Williamsburg. The Velvet something, she tried to cut me out, take everything. Liquidate my shares without my consent. I just came here to talk, to work things out professionally, and she..." Ottone pressed the gun harder against Kane's temple. The man's words cut off with a gasp. "I don't care about your business." Each word dropped like a stone into still water. "Where is the child?" She interfered. Kane's voice rose, desperate and defensive, the voice of a man who'd justified his own violence so many times he believed it himself. "She called the cops last time, the little brat. I was just trying to have a conversation with her mother, a business conversation, and she picked up the phone and dialed 911. It cost me 3 hours in holding before my lawyer got me out. She ruined everything." Ottone shifted his weight, driving his knee deeper into Kane's spine. Something popped, vertebrae compressing, maybe cracking. Kane screamed, the sound high and breaking. "Last time I asked nicely," Ottone said, though nothing about this was nice. His voice carried the weight of 20 years of violence, of consequences delivered in basements and warehouses, of men who'd begged and pleaded and died anyway. "Where is Arcelia?" "Bedroom." Kane gasped, words tumbling out between sobs that shook his whole body. "Down the hall, probably hiding in the bedroom. She always hides there, under her bed or in the closet with her stupid stuffed animals and her phone. I wasn't going to hurt her, I swear to God. I just needed to talk to Valentina, make her see reason, make her understand that you don't cut out a partner, you don't. You just terrorized a 7-year-old girl." Ottone's voice was colder than a Morgan winter, colder than the East River in February. "You beat her mother unconscious while she hid and prayed someone would save them. You made her believe she was going to die tonight." Kane started to respond, started to offer another excuse, another justification. His mouth opened, words forming about business and respect and teaching lessons. But then a sound cut through the apartment like a ray of light through darkness, like hope-piercing despair. A small voice, trembling and uncertain, called from somewhere down the dark hallway. "Otto? Is that really you?" The world stopped. Time froze. Ottone's breath caught in his chest, his entire body going rigid. She'd remembered his name. In all her terror, hiding alone in the darkness while her mother was being beaten unconscious, while a monster hunted her through her own home, she'd held on to those 4 letters like a lifeline. Otto. The fortress around his heart, the walls he'd spent 20 years building, brick by agonizing brick, each one mortared with memories of his brother's blood, didn't crack. It shattered. Completely. Irrevocably. 20 years of deliberate numbness, of emotional amputation, of convincing himself that caring was weakness, evaporated in the space between one heartbeat and the next. "I'm here, Arcelia." His voice changed, softened in a way it hadn't since the night Dante died in a hospital bed wearing sunflower pajamas. The tone was gentle, careful, like approaching a wounded bird or a frightened child. Like being human again. "You're safe now. I promise you're safe." A small sob of relief echoed down the hall, followed by the sound of movement, a closet door creaking open, small feet on carpet. Ottone looked down at the pathetic man pinned beneath him, this coward who'd made a child believe she might die tonight, who'd beaten a woman unconscious, who'd turned a home into a battlefield. Rage threatened to overtake calculation. His finger moved to the trigger. He wanted to pull it, to end this permanently, to remove Thomas Kane from the world like the cancer he was. But Arcelia was listening. She'd been through enough. She didn't need to hear another gunshot, didn't need another nightmare added to the collection she'd carry for the rest of her life. He made a decision. He hauled Kane up by his collar with one hand, guns still pressed against his skull, and dragged him toward the kitchen, away from the hallway, away from innocent eyes that had seen too much already. Kane struggled weakly, but he was no match for Ottone's strength, for 20 years of conditioning and discipline. "Move," Ottone growled, his voice returning to its usual ice. "And if you make a sound, if you say one word loud enough for that girl to hear, it'll be your last. Do you understand me?" Kane nodded frantically, blood from his cut cheek dripping onto his expensive ruined shirt. They disappeared into the kitchen, leaving the destroyed living room behind, leaving Valentina unconscious but breathing. Ottone kicked the kitchen door closed behind them with his heel. Whatever happened next, Arcelia wouldn't see it. She'd already seen enough. In the kitchen, Ottone shoved Kane against the counter with enough force to rattle the dishes still hanging in the cabinets, to send a coffee mug crashing to the floor where it shattered into pieces. The gun never wavered from its position at the base of Kane's skull, pressed against the soft spot where the spine met the brain, where one pull of the trigger would end everything. "Listen very carefully," Ottone said, his voice low and deliberate, each word a promise of violence. "I'm going to give you something you don't deserve, a choice." Kane whimpered, blood trickling from his nose, mixing with the tears and sweat on his face. Up close, Ottone could see the man was younger than he'd thought, maybe 35, with the kind of soft features that came from a life of privilege. Expensive haircut growing out. Manicured nails now broken and bloody. The kind of man who'd probably never faced real consequences for anything. That ended tonight. Option 1, Ottone continued, his breath cold against Kane's ear. "You disappear from New York tonight. You never contact Valentina again. You never speak Arcelia's name. You never set foot in Brooklyn, Manhattan, Queens, the Bronx, or Staten Island. You vanish so completely that even your own mother won't be able to find you." He leaned closer, the gun pressing harder. "By sunrise, every bank account you have will be emptied. Every investment will be liquidated. Every business connection will be severed. Your nightclub partnership? Gone. Your real estate investments? Foreclosed. Your credit cards? Maxed out and canceled. That Mercedes in your garage? Repossessed. The condo in Tribeca? On the market by Monday. The life you knew ends tonight, but you get to keep breathing. Kane's whole body trembled, shaking like a leaf in a hurricane. Option 2, Ottone pressed the gun harder until Kane gasped in pain. You refuse. You try to negotiate. You tell me this isn't fair, that you have rights, that this is your city too. And I show you what happens to men who hurt children. What I do to cowards who beat women and terrorize 7-year-old girls in sunflower dresses. I have a warehouse in Red Hook with a soundproof room and tools that would make medieval torturers jealous. I have associates who specialize in making death take days instead of seconds. Trust me, Thomas, you don't want option 2. I'll go, Kane gasped, words tumbling out in a desperate rush. I'll disappear. I swear. I'll leave tonight. I'll go to my brother's place in Miami, or maybe Chicago, or anywhere. Please. I'll never come back. I promise. Your promises mean nothing, Ottone said coldly. But your fear? That I believe. You have 1 hour to leave this city. Pack a bag, get in your car, and drive. Don't go home. My people are already there. Don't go to your office. They're there too. Don't call your friends, your lawyer, your accountant. Don't withdraw cash from ATMs. Don't use your credit cards after tonight. Just drive and don't stop until you're so far from here that you forget what New York looks like. He released Kane, letting him crumple to the floor like a broken puppet. The man lay there, sobbing, all his rage and violence evaporated in the face of real consequences. And Thomas. Ottone crouched down, making eye contact. If I ever hear your name again, if you ever come within 100 miles of this family, if you even think about Valentina or Arcelia, there won't be a third option. There won't be a conversation. There won't be a warning. I'll just find you, wherever you are, and I'll finish what I should have finished tonight. Do you understand? Kane nodded frantically, blood and snot and tears mixing on his face. Get out of my sight. Kane scrambled to his feet and ran, stumbling over his own terror, banging into the door frame in his haste to escape. The apartment door slammed behind him seconds later. Gone. Exiled by fear alone, by the recognition that he'd kicked the wrong hornet's nest, that he'd terrorized the wrong child. Ottone stood in the destroyed kitchen, breathing hard, adrenaline still coursing through his system. He could have killed Kane. Should have killed Kane. 20 years ago, he would have without hesitation. Men like that didn't deserve second chances. But Dante's voice echoed in his memory. Be a hero, Otto. Like Wolverine. Heroes didn't execute defeated enemies. They gave them chances to be better, even when they didn't deserve it. Ottone returned to the living room and knelt beside Valentina. Her pulse was weak, but steady beneath his fingers when he checked her neck. She'd survive this. The human body was remarkably resilient, especially when there was a reason to keep fighting. And Valentina had the best reason in the world, waiting in a bedroom closet. He pulled out his phone, dialing a number few people possessed. Dr. Lim, it's Mazzi. I need you at an address in Brooklyn. Immediate. Discreet. A woman, severe trauma, unconscious, but stable pulse. He rattled off the address. 20 minutes. 15. Dr. Sarah Lim replied, already moving. She'd been his personal physician for a decade, had treated everything from gunshot wounds to broken bones, and she never asked questions. What happened? Domestic violence. She's going to need x-rays, probably has broken ribs, definitely has a concussion. I need her treated here, not at a hospital. Can you do it? I'll bring equipment. 15 minutes. Ottone ended the call and stood slowly. The hardest part was still ahead. He walked slowly toward the hallway, toward the bedroom at the end where darkness pooled like water, where a terrified child was hiding because the world had taught her that adults couldn't be trusted, that homes weren't safe, that monsters were real and wore expensive suits. The door was half open. He pushed it gently, carefully, announcing his presence without startling her. Arcelia. A closet door creaked. And there she was, small, trembling, wearing a yellow dress covered in sunflowers that seemed to glow even in the dim light. The dress was wrinkled, tear-stained. Tears streaked her face, cutting clean lines through the dust and fear. Her phone clutched in both hands like a talisman, like a prayer that had been answered. She looked up at him with eyes too old for 7 years, eyes that had seen too much violence, too much fear. "Why did you come?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Ottone's throat tightened. His vision blurred. His voice, when it came, carried 22 years of buried grief, of promises kept and broken and finally fulfilled. "A long time ago, someone very special made me promise to protect kids when they were scared. My little brother, Dante." He knelt down slowly, making himself smaller, less threatening, lowering himself to her eye level. "He would have thought you were the bravest girl in the world." Arcelia's lip trembled. Her eyes filled with fresh tears. "Is my mama okay?" "She's going to be fine. I have a doctor coming to help her. She fought very hard to protect you. She's a hero." "And the bad man?" "He's gone. He's never coming back. I promise you that." Something in his voice, in the certainty of his promise, made her believe him. Children had instincts about these things and could tell when adults were lying or telling the truth. She saw the truth in his eyes. Then she stepped forward, still clutching her phone, and wrapped her small arms around his neck, sobbing into his shoulder. Her whole body shook with the release of fear, of terror, of the horrible certainty that she was going to die tonight. And Ottone Mazzi, after 22 years of deliberate emotional death, after building an empire on ice and calculation, after convincing himself that caring was weakness, finally came home. He wrapped his arms around her gently, carefully, and let her cry. His own eyes burned with tears he hadn't shed since Dante's funeral, tears he'd thought himself incapable of anymore. "You're safe now," he whispered. "I promise you're safe." And for the first time in 22 years, Ottone Mazzi meant it. Dr. Sarah Lim arrived in 14 minutes, carrying 2 medical cases and asking no questions beyond what she needed to know for treatment. She was a small woman in her 50s, Korean-American, with steady hands and the kind of calm efficiency that came from years of treating injuries that couldn't be explained to emergency rooms. She went to work on Valentina immediately, checking vitals, examining wounds, setting up a portable 4. "She'll recover," Dr. Lim said after 20 minutes of examination, cleaning the wounds with practiced precision. 3 broken ribs, severe concussion, orbital fracture around the left eye, internal bruising. But nothing that won't heal. She's strong. Lucky, too, an inch to the left, and that blow to her head could have been fatal. She glanced at Ottone. "She'll need to rest for at least 6 weeks. No heavy lifting, no stress. Someone will need to take care of her." "That's handled," Ottone said quietly. While Dr. Lim worked, Ottone stepped into the hallway, leaving Arcelia sitting with her mother, holding Valentina's hand while the doctor worked. He made 3 phone calls that would change everything, that would redirect resources built over 20 years toward a purpose he'd forgotten he had. The first was to his lieutenant, Enzo Caruso, a man who'd been with him for 15 years, who'd never questioned an order, who knew how to get things done quietly and efficiently. "Enzo, it's me. I need Thomas Kane erased. Not killed, erased. Every bank account, every investment, every asset he has, liquidated all by sunrise. Make it look like bad investments, market crashes, whatever. I want him financially destroyed." He paused, watching through the bedroom door as Arcelia stroked her mother's hair. "And set up a trust fund. $5 million. Beneficiary, Arcelia Romano, age 7. Accessible for education and living expenses starting now, full access at age 25. Anonymous donor. Make sure it's ironclad. Lawyers can't touch it. Creditors can't touch it. Nobody can touch it except her. Done, Enzo said. Anything else? Yes. If Kane ever resurfaces anywhere in the country, I want to know immediately. I don't care if it's a speeding ticket in Montana or a library card in Oregon. I want to know. Consider it done, boss. The second call went to his real estate attorney, Marcus Webb, a man who'd helped him acquire half of Soho and never asked where the money came from. Marcus, I need a property. Secure penthouse in Manhattan. View of Central Park if possible, but security is the priority. 3 bedrooms, modern amenities, doorman building with proper security protocols. Move-in ready within 30 days, sooner if possible. He glanced back at the destroyed apartment. Price isn't an issue. It's for a client who needs protection and peace. I have something available, Marcus said immediately. Penthouse in a building on Central Park West. The owner just moved to London and wants a quick sale. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, renovated last year. 24-hour doorman, security cameras, the works. I can have papers ready by Monday. Buy it. Cash. No mortgage, no paper trail. Put it in a trust, anonymous beneficial owner. I'll send you the details. You got it. The third call was the hardest. He opened his calendar on his phone, a schedule normally packed with meetings, deals, territory negotiations, financial reviews. The life of a crime lord was surprisingly administrative. He scrolled through the next year and blocked out every Sunday. Every single one. Sunday meetings? Cancelled. Sunday business calls? Rescheduled. Sunday reviews of operations? Delegated to Enzo. For the first time in 20 years, Ottone Mazzi was putting something before his empire. For the first time since Dante's death, he was choosing family, chosen family, over profit and power. He made one more call, this one to a contact in the NYPD, a detective who supplemented his income with information that kept him in Ottone's pocket. I need Kane's assault charge buried, Ottone said. Valentina Romano won't be pressing charges. Make sure it stays that way. No paperwork, no follow-up, no case number. Tonight never happened, officially. That'll cost extra. I don't care. Make it disappear. 8 months later, the transformation was complete. Valentina Romano stood behind the counter of Valentina's, a small bakery tucked into a Soho street corner between a designer boutique and an artisanal cheese shop. The space was beautiful, exposed brick walls, vintage pendant lights, a marble counter where fresh pastries gleamed under glass. The aroma of fresh bread and espresso filled the air, mixing with the sweet scent of sugar and vanilla. The bruises had faded months ago. The orbital fracture had healed. The broken ribs were just a memory that ached on cold mornings. The fear in her eyes had been replaced by quiet strength, the kind that came from surviving something that should have destroyed you but didn't. She smiled at customers, boxed pastries with practiced efficiency, made recommendations in accented English that charmed the Soho professionals who stopped in for their morning coffee. She'd rebuilt her life one cupcake at a time, one customer at a time, one day without fear at a time. The bakery had opened with an anonymous investor's backing, a trust that appeared in her bank account with a lawyer's letter explaining that a benefactor wanted to support women entrepreneurs recovering from trauma. No strings attached. No ownership stake. Just money and a chance to start over. Valentina knew who the benefactor was, but she never said his name. Some gifts were better accepted without questions. Arcelia Romano attended PS 290, a private elementary school 3 blocks from their penthouse. She wore a uniform now, navy skirt, white blouse, school crest on her chest. Her backpack was covered in sunflower patches, a reminder of the night that changed everything, transformed from a symbol of trauma into a badge of survival. They lived in a beautiful apartment on the 15th floor of a building on Central Park West. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the park where Arcelia could watch seasons change, leaves turning gold in fall, snow blanketing the meadow in winter, flowers blooming in spring. She had her own room painted pale yellow, filled with books and art supplies, and a desk where she did homework under a lamp shaped like a sunflower. The nightmares come less frequently now. Once a week instead of every night. Then once a month. The therapist, another anonymous gift, said that was normal, that healing wasn't linear, that she was making remarkable progress for a child who'd experienced such trauma. Arcelia was learning to be a child again. Learning that homes could be safe. Learning that adults could be trusted. Learning that monsters could be defeated. Every Sunday at 2 p.m., Uncle Otto arrived with a chess set under one arm and a box of sunflower cupcakes from Valentina's bakery in the other. He wore casual clothes on these visits, jeans, button-down shirts, sometimes a sweater when the weather turned cold. Not the expensive suits of Ottone Mazzi. Just Otto, the man who'd saved them. He taught Arcelia strategy and patience, how knights moved in L shapes and queens controlled the board. How pawns could become powerful if they survived long enough. How every piece mattered, even the smallest ones. You can't protect the king if you don't protect the pawns first, he'd say, moving pieces across the board. In chess and in life. They'd sit by the window, playing game after game, while Valentina brought them tea and homemade cookies and watched with grateful eyes that sometimes filled with tears she'd wipe away before Arcelia noticed. Sometimes they'd just talk. Arcelia would tell him about school, about her friends, about the books she was reading. He'd listen with an attention he gave to no one else, as if her words about third-grade drama and spelling tests were the most important things in the world. Sometimes she'd ask about Dante. Otto would tell her stories about his brother, the comic books, the sunflower pajamas, the dreams of being a hero. Arcelia would listen with wide eyes, understanding without being told that she and Dante were connected, that they were the reason Uncle Otto smiled now when he used to only frown. "Do you think Dante would have liked me?" she asked once. "He would have loved you," Otto said, his voice thick with emotion. "You remind me of him. Brave when you shouldn't have to be. Kind when the world isn't kind back." The wrong number had found exactly the right person. Fate, chance, divine intervention, whatever it was, had connected a terrified child with the one man in New York City who needed to save her as much as she needed to be saved. Ottone Mazzi still controlled New York's shadow economy, still moved millions through shell companies and luxury real estate, still commanded respect and fear in rooms where his word was law. But now his empire served a different purpose alongside profit, protecting families like Arcelia's, funding shelters for domestic violence survivors, dismantling men like Thomas Kane before they could hurt anyone else. His network of informants now included social workers. His money laundering operations now funded halfway houses. His import-export business now shipped donated goods to shelters across the 5 boroughs. The man who once felt nothing now felt everything. And it saved 3 lives, Valentina's, who'd survived the beating and rebuilt herself stronger. Arcelia's, who'd learned that crying for help could bring salvation instead of disappointment. And his own Ottone Mazzi's soul, buried for 22 years under the weight of Ottone Mazzi's empire, finally resurrected by a child in a sunflower dress. Dante's promise, made 22 years ago in a hospital room under fluorescent lights, with blood on sunflower pajamas and love in dying eyes, had finally been kept. And Ottone Mazzi was finally home. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that one person really can make a difference, then be that person in our community. Subscribe and help us prove that stories of hope and justice can change the world. Together, we're not just watching, we're standing up. Let's get to 50,000 subscribers who refuse to stay silent.